Hey, it's Karlie,
Hey, it's Shamina, and
and we're
we're emotional.
That was a bad one. Oh, we're emotionful.
Today we are talking about imposter syndrome. This was a request from a viewer, so sorry, my cats are attacking.
It was a
So
request from our viewer.
request from a viewer. We are super stoked to be able to answer your questions and kind of give our feedback on some of the stuff that you guys would like to see in episodes. So if you requested this, or even if you didn't, but you thought of it anyway, this one's for you.
So, before we dive in, I want to shout out our patrons from Patreon: Kevin Gallagher, Trees Gallagher, and Joanne Stewart. Thank you, thank you. And if you haven't, check it out, our Patreon page, and maybe become a member.
What you eating?
Oh, say it again.
What are you eating?
Pineapple.
Stop with the winking. You did that last week as you were talking about your soothing your throat from your cough. You went,
Oh, I've been in the winking mood lately because I noticed I winked the other day too, and I'm like, I don't wink like this usually. Okay, so before we dive into this epi, let's
get emotional.
let's fill up, man. I don't know where I was going with that. I had something, but I don't know. But yeah, let's do it.
All right. So today we're talking about imposter syndrome. This was a request from one of our viewers to discuss in this season. So if you're listening, congratulations. You won the big prize of listening to our podcast about imposter syndrome. Sorry, I choked on air. So Karlie, I want to ask you first, what do you know about imposter syndrome, or have you ever felt like you've experienced it before?
Good questions. I don't know much. I did Google a little bit, and it was like when you don't feel like you're like it was like when you don't feel like you can do what you are capable of. I don't know if I'm wording it right, but like pretty much make you feel incapable of doing things that you can do, or kind of like you downplay yourself. I think that's kind of how I interpret it. I don't think that I've personally experienced it because I think I'm a badass bitch, and I will always tell myself that, and not in like a, but like every morning I wake up and I'm like, I know my worth. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's how I take it. So I don't know. I mean, I guess sometimes I get nervous and I'm like, oh, I don't know. But like, that's, I think for me, like nerves. That's not really like a habitual thing. But I remember when we were originally discussing this, and I was talking to you about how like my dad, me and him were, I think you know the story. We were sitting on the couch and he was holding my nephew, and he was just like, I cannot believe I'm sitting on this couch right now with my grandson and my daughter. He's like, I still feel like I'm 18 years old. And I remember bringing that up to you, and you were like, I don't think that's really like imposter syndrome. But I'm not like super familiar with it. Like I said, I Googled it a little bit to have some information, but it sounds like, I don't know, like, I just feel like everyone should wake up and be like, I'm amazing. But I get it. Like, I will say, like, after the breakup, I really had to wake up and tell myself those things because it was hard. So I guess maybe that, I don't know, maybe like in a sense, like I felt like after the breakup, like I wasn't capable of doing some things, like, like he really like tore down like my worth in that sense of like, so maybe like in that sense that I had to like rebuild, because it's definitely a rebuilding thing. Like I said, after that I guess that was something I would tell my, like I have on my mirror, like I am loved, I am worthy, I matter. So I don't know.
Very,
Random.
no, optimistic, I guess, mindset. You're like, everybody should wake up and do that. I'm thinking like, bitch.
Well, I just, it made, like when I Googled it, I'm like, dang, like someone who feels this way, that must, like, you know, like that's like, I'm sure really hard to not feel like you're capable of doing things that, I don't think I'm explaining it well, because when I searched it, like every time I say it, I'm like, this isn't like, you know, but it's like, I guess like if I'm an example, I don't know, you give an example because you're the professional, and I feel like maybe I'm not fully even grasping the concept.
Okay, so imposter syndrome is more of like, not necessarily about like being able to like live up to your potential, so to speak, or believing like you can do the things that you want to do, but more of the accomplishments and the things that you have done in your life. It doesn't feel like you've done it. People have described it to me in a clinical. Sorry, I have to make sure. My dog has been eating out of the litter box like a
Ugh.
dumbass. And so I was like, is that him eating out of the litter box, or
No,
is that him drinking
I won't
water?
have a cat.
So it's him drinking water. So anyway, so people have described it to me, and I'll talk about my own kind of personal experience with it as well. But basically, you know, they recognize the things that they've done in their life, but they feel like somebody else has made those accomplishments, or that they don't deserve the accomplishments that they have made. So I think imposter syndrome is directly tied, and this is my own personal opinion, not like research based or anything, but directly tied to our feelings of self-worth. Because if we feel like we have low feelings of self-worth, low feelings of self-worth, then of course you're not going to be able to kind of appreciate your accomplishments or feel as though you deserve them, or that you're doing the right things to be able to get to kind of where you're at. So that's kind of the over like umbrella imposter syndrome of you just feel like you don't deserve the things that you're doing or accomplishments that you've already made. So I get this question a lot as a therapist. Imposter syndrome is not a diagnosable condition. Let me say that one more time.
So it's not in the DSM-5.
It is not in our diagnostic and statistical manual, which is what we use to diagnose any type of mental health condition, or I don't believe it's in the ICD-10, which is it's like the medical classification, not the mental health. I can't remember what the ICD-10 stands for. ICD-10 stands for. So imposter syndrome is not a diagnosable condition. I have a lot of clients who come to me and they TikTok. They are scrolling on TikTok. Shamina, I think I have imposter syndrome. You know, can you diagnose me with this? Or Shamina, I have imposter syndrome. And I'm like, where did you fucking learn about imposter syndrome? 9 times out of 10, they fucking learned it about TikTok, or they Googled it. And Google and TikTok are not my friends. I do not like them as a therapist. As a normal person, great. As a therapist, no. So
as a therapist,
I tell my clients, I'm like, this is going to be the death of my profession, because everybody comes to me, they're like, Shamina, I think I've got this, or this was on my For You page, and you know, this is what's going on. And I'm like, yo, TikTok, no.
Well, it's funny you say that, because it brought me back to I don't know if I've told people what I used to do at my old job, but I would test people for HIV. And you don't know how many times I would get people in like butt crack nervous, and it's a new term I came up with, butt crack nervous, and they'd be like, I Googled symptoms of HIV, and I'm like, bro, first off, do not Google. First, like, one, if you're this nervous, why are you having unprotected sex? And secondly, get tested. Stop Googling, because it's going to tell you that you have HIV, and it's going to tell you that it's progressed to AIDS already. And it's probably, so I'm like, oh God, I used to have like people come in all the time, and I'm like, one, if you're this nervous, you should not be having unprotected sex. And secondly, get routinely tested then, man. Like, but I was the same way. I was like, I hate, like, whenever someone said Google, I was like, I'm gonna stop you right here. I'm not even gonna let you finish this sentence, because no, just no, like, negative.
Yeah, I tell my clients, I was like, before you Google, come to a session, talk to me about it, and then you can Google afterwards. Let's see if you still want to Google. So,
Yeah.
It is not a diagnosable condition. I think of it more of like this social or psychological like phenomenon that tends to happen. There's no actual, I can't express that enough, because everybody's like, I have imposter syndrome, diagnose me. I'm like, that's not real. So
You think it's like something that people experience when they've gone through like traumatic experiences in their life, and maybe they're like healing and progressing and growing through that? The only reason I ask is because, like, I feel like after my breakup, that's probably when I questioned, like, I would second guess myself or things like that, probably the most. And like I don't know, again, if it's to the extent of like you were explaining of like I felt like someone else, like I didn't deserve where I was at. I don't think it was like that, but it was like I really had to like build back up my self-worth, kind of like that you said it's correlated with.
I think you had more of because of the emotional abuse in your relationship, it was more of like you as a person and having to redefine how you viewed yourself, how you viewed other people, and like your feelings of self-worth. But you didn't kind of go like, I got my master's degree and I feel like I don't deserve that, or I didn't work hard enough for it, or this happened. So I think you had like part of it, but not the actual imposter syndrome type of thing. But I do think the two are tied together. But just because you have low feelings of self-worth, because I think we all do at some point in our lives, like one way or another, doesn't necessarily mean like correlation doesn't equal causation. So I notice kind of this trend in therapy, but it just because you have low feelings of self-worth doesn't mean that you always feel like an imposter in your life type of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'll talk a little bit kind of about my personal experience with imposter syndrome, because I've definitely been there, done that. Love it.
I'm interested to know this.
I think there is something to be said about people who have experienced some form of trauma in their life, and that because of the way that changes our view of ourselves or the impact that it has and the messages that we receive, I think, and again, this is my personal opinion, not clinically proven, not research based or anything, but I think from a trauma perspective, it makes us more likely to develop imposter syndrome at times because of the low feelings of self-worth that the trauma has caused and the psychological impact of the trauma. But also for my clients who are anxious and perfectionistic, I see that those two things, and you don't necessarily have to be anxious to be perfectionistic, but usually the two
you keep talking.
Usually the two go hand in hand, is that the anxiety drives the perfectionism and the high expectations that we set for ourselves. So I'm one of those people. Hi, welcome to the club. I'm Shamina. So my kind of experience with imposter syndrome, I think it really hit me when I was in graduate school. So I have a bachelor's degree and I have a master's degree, all of the fun stuff that you have to do in order to be a therapist. I thought I heard somebody coming in the door, and I was like, nobody should be here. It's fine, guys. We're fine. If somebody comes on camera and Karlie doesn't know them, so
and Karlie doesn't know them.
Yeah.
Like if I'm not like, hey, what's up?
Yeah, like if you're like, Shamina, who is this person? And I'm like, Karlie, I don't know. Call the police.
All right, get back to your story. I'm interested. You can't just stop midway and have a little mini thing. Tell me.
So my kind of experience with imposter syndrome, I can remember when it first happened. So when I was in my graduate program, my last semester, we had to do a 40-hour internship, which is basically I worked 40 hours a week for free. That sucked. And I was at a college campus at their counseling center, their college counseling center. I can speak. So that's where I was doing my internship at. And it was multidisciplinary, which basically means that there were student interns. So there were graduate student interns, which was me because I was getting my master's. There were doctoral interns, so they were getting their PhD. There were social work interns, so kind of like what Karlie was doing, getting her master's in social work. My master's was in rehabilitation and mental health counseling. I was like, what did I get my degree in? I don't know. So that was just the intern part, but the staff was made up of licensed mental health counselors, psychologists. I think we had somebody with a PsyD, which is similar to a doctorate, but a little bit different. So still kind of the PhD type of program. We just call it something differently in the field of PsyD versus PhD. And I think that was it. So very clearly on, you could tell there was kind of this hierarchy of the therapists, like the psychologists and the PsyDs were kind of all the way up here because, you know, they got the PhD behind their name, they got the doctor, fun stuff. And then you had like the clinical counselors, like the licensed mental health counselors. And then you had like the PhD students. So those who were in the program studying to get their PhD, those interns. And then you had like the master's level clinician. And it wasn't, the counseling center that I was at, it wasn't intentional. That was just kind of, you notice that hierarchy very, very quickly within like the culture and the dynamic of it. So I thought that was very interesting. And I remember all of the interns, we were doing like orientation or something, and somebody like looked around in the room and they were like, does anybody else feel like they're not supposed to be here? And this is just like, they have imposter syndrome. And I was like, what is that? But that sounds like me. Because this was my first experience actually like being a therapist full time. It wasn't, you know, I had all these classes, I was doing this stuff. I would only go into an internship for like a couple of hours. Like this was like my job every day for a whole semester. And I can remember, and even after I graduated, I always felt very inferior to people who already had their license, and that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't on their level. I couldn't possibly do the things that I was supposed to do as a therapist. Like I didn't have enough, what's the word that I'm looking for? I didn't feel secure enough in like my education or my clinical skills. I was like, no, like I can't do this. Like this is no, like send me back to school. Like I'll take tests and stuff, but I can't do the clinical stuff. And that was kind of my first experience with it, because I was in graduate school. You're, at least at the end, you're kind of like thrown out and you're like, okay, let's take everything you've learned for the past 2.5 years and go apply it and go see clients. And it was very exciting, but it was also constantly this nagging of, you can't do this. I don't know if you're ready for this. I don't know if you know how to handle this. Like you don't deserve to be here.
Okay, but like my thing is I feel like that's like nerves and stuff, because when you're saying the story, I feel like, okay, I feel that exact same way. Like even with this job that I had, like when they were like ready for me to go on my own, I'm like, no, like I don't feel like I'm capable of doing this on my own. And like with grad school too, like sometimes I'm like, there's no way, like, or when I was a substitute teacher or whatever, like even sometimes I'm like, I still feel like an 18-year-old. Like, how the heck am I 27 years old? And like, I've like, when I was a sub, I always wanted to teach high schoolers, but I'm like, they're probably going to think I'm one of them because I'm so tiny. And like, so like, that was one of the reasons why I hadn't, but I feel like, I don't know. I just feel like that's like life. Like, I don't know, because it's just like, sometimes I'm like, how the heck am I 27 and I own a house and I'm living on my own? Like, what the heck? No, I still need my mom, like, so I'm just like, I don't know, like, because from you telling this story, I'm like, yeah, I feel like I've been there several times, like, even again, just with this job, or like at my other job when they would teach me, like when they were teaching us how to do HIV, and I'm like, I can't go alone to test someone for like I never felt ready, but you kind of got to do it. And then after, when I started doing it, I was like, oh yeah. And then I felt like I was like the expert, and it was like, oh, you newbie, I have to teach you how to test, like, so I don't know. I just feel like you telling this story is like, I just feel like that's like life. Like, I feel like one day we're going to wake up and we're going to be like freaking 70, and we're going to be like, how the heck are we 70? I still feel like I'm 20 and I lived this whole life. I don't know.
But it's more, it definitely is like rooted in anxiety, I think, but I think the lens that you're describing it is I can't believe that I'm here, and that I've experienced these things. I've bought a house, I have the job, like I'm living this moment in my life, as opposed to it feels like what I've done to get here wasn't me, or that I didn't deserve, like you didn't deserve to or you don't, even now, like you don't deserve to like have your house, or you're not worthy enough because, let's say, hypothetically, because you're working part-time right now and you're trying to like find yourself, like something with imposter syndrome could potentially be like, I don't deserve to like have my house or be able to pay my bills because I'm not working 40 hours a week, or I'm not doing the things that I enjoy doing, type of thing, as opposed to like, wow, like I made it, like I'm here, I can't believe I did these things. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess it's just hard because I guess maybe I've never experienced it, because I guess what I've experienced is like you said, of like, I can't believe I'm 27 and I own my own house, but like I know I worked hard and I know I did what I had to do to get there. So it's not like me questioning like that I shouldn't have this. It's like, no, I put that work in, so I
Right.
guess I just see it
Right.
as like
So
how
I think that's different, because even for myself, like I have, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I have the master's degree, I have a graduate certificate, I have the bachelor's degree, all of these things. And even when I tell new clients and I go through like my credentials, saying it seems like I'm just going through the motions. And I have the degrees like on my wall, like I can see them, but at times when I'm remembering going through this, it doesn't feel, it's not like, yeah, like I did the hard work and I made it. Like sometimes I have those, but other times it's like it doesn't feel like I did those things. And when I remember them and I go back, I think my graduate degree, that was one that was like, yes, like I did this. This was hard. But like for my bachelor's, or even, when I was in high school, I got my AA degree. I was the only one in my class who graduated with an associate's degree and a high school diploma. And I say that, but it's like, there's a big disconnect for me of, yeah, I did that thing, but and on an emotional level, it's not like, wow, like I did that thing, like that is so amazing, like I worked so hard, I made it to where I wanted to be. It just feels like, yeah, like I did those things, and it's almost, my memory of them all feel very foggy and disconnected, and what's the word that I'm looking for? Distant. Like I can recognize, like, yeah, Shamina, you did those things, you accomplished those things, but in like this present day moment, am I super thrilled about them? Not particularly. Does it really matter to me right now? Not particularly. Like obviously it does, because I did the things to get where I am, because that was my ultimate like career goal, and what have you. But I can remember even going through the whole process of just my education in general, I always questioned, is this going to be worth it? Or is what I'm experiencing now, again, I guess like worth it? All of the dedication, all of the sacrifice, all of the hard work. I could remember, particularly in high school, I used to think that all the time was, is this worth doing all of this for me? Like, what is this going to do for me? How can I, kind of achieve my goals? And everybody was like, you're doing fantastic. This is so amazing. And, part of me felt that, but the bigger part was, I need to do this. I have to do this. I need to achieve. I need to be the best, because that was what was feeding my self-worth at the time, as opposed to like, holy shit, I got an AA degree and a high school diploma, or I have a bachelor's and a master's. It was, I needed to keep achieving because that helped to give me this sense of accomplishment and worth that I meant something. And when I was younger, that was everything to me. If I wasn't excelling in school, my whole world crumbled. Or I can remember in high school, me and somebody else, we had this ridiculous competition going. And even within my class, it was like you're on one side or you're on the other. And
I was friends with both. I was oblivious. I was just like,
you had no idea, but everybody else knew.
I mean, I knew, but I was like, not me. I don't care.
And it was a big deal. But like looking back, that none of that matters. And that was my whole thing, was like, I have to be better. I have to be the best, because then I can feel whole.
I'll just say I feel like I can understand why it's not diagnosable, because it just seems very like different for anybody. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel like, again, you explaining that is like, okay, yeah, like when I got my master's, like now I'm like, what the heck? Why did I get my master's? Or not like that, but like, was it worth it? And sometimes I look back and I'm like, thinking about like that in the sense of like, did I just get it to get it? And what, you know what I'm saying? And like, I kind of like, I guess going through the motions, I don't know.
Would you feel that way if your master's was in, like me, like I know that therapy is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be a therapist, and that's constantly been affirmed. And so my master's degree means like, yes, I can do that. And I'm not questioning, was it worth it, in the sense of, I guess I'm wondering, because your career path currently and what you want to do with your life is not the same as what you got your master's degree in. And so I wonder if you would have these questions if what you got your master's degree in was where you felt your calling was.
Yeah, I guess maybe that makes a point. I guess, because, I took a whole class on the DSM-5 and I hated it. I hated that class. And that's another reason how I knew I'd never be a freaking therapist, because I felt like I had every freaking syndrome after reading it. But I hated, whenever I had to read that book, I was just like, oh my God. But I don't know. I think that if anyone has ever read the DSM, there's like specific things, like you have to, certain things, and they have to last a certain amount of time. It's not just like, oh, you experience this one time, you're diagnosed with it. It has to like last for like 6 months to a year, things like that. So I feel like I can get how it's not a diagnosable thing, because it seems very vague and broad in its definition. Yeah, it's horrible.
My desk copy of the DSM. So
Show how thick it is.
It's not, this isn't as thick. This is the small.
That does not do the real DSM any justice.
No, the real one is holding up my laptop right now.
It's like this freaking thick. Yeah, and turn that baby. Yeah. I read that thing front to back.
So what Carmen's mentioning is that in order to be diagnosed with anything like depression, anxiety, PTSD, whatever, you have to meet specific criteria. You have to have a number of that specific criteria. It needs to last a certain amount of time. It's not just, yeah, I've experienced this. I have trauma, so I must have PTSD, or I get sad sometimes, so I must be depressed. Not necessarily the case. And I think you're right in the sense that it is kind of different for other people. There's not like specific criteria, so to speak. There are certain like traits, and I think it's more of like the feeling disconnected. I think for a lot of people with imposter syndrome, we continue to work towards the next thing. So, I got my bachelor's degree, and it's like, okay, but now I need to go to grad school. Like bachelor's doesn't matter now. I got it. Okay, whatever. Now I got my master's. It's like, okay, now I need to, get my hours for being a registered intern. It was like, okay, I got it. Now I need to get licensed. Now I need to do this. Now I need to do that. It's very just achievement driven, because it's never enough for people. We don't feel like that fulfillment and like, yes, like I did this is amazing. And we may at times, but it's not kind of what you talk about, Karlie, of like, wow, like I can't believe like I'm 27 and I have these things, or I've done this stuff, or I worked really hard. I think at times like we recognize the effort that we put in, but it's like, okay, that doesn't matter. I need to move on to the next thing. And I find that most people with anxiety tend to have like that more, some forms of anxiety, not all people with anxiety experience, but more of like the achievement driven type of mentality. And it's also difficult for people to slow down and sit with the accomplishment and the gravity of the effort that you've put in, because there is such a disconnect of, I don't deserve this, I didn't do enough to earn this, whatever type of language that you have for yourself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. I just feel like I'm chilling, you know. I'm content. I'm not trying to strive. Like, you know me, I'm in this zone where I'm just trying to figure out what the heck I want to do. So I'm cool with trying. I will say, like, sometimes with my I don't know. I get what you're saying. I just think it's hard for me to relate and speak on, because I don't think I have experienced this, at least from what we're talking about. Like,
right. But I think, and we talked about this, I think last week with I don't remember what episode, but with like the empathy piece, and that you can relate to certain aspects of this though. And that's where it comes into play, because you can relate to like ooh, I don't know if I can do this on my own, or, you know, I feel nervous about, you know, kind of being independent in this particular thing that I need to do. So the emotions you can kind of relate to, but not the disconnect or the distance from the achievements kind of thing. That's the feel that I'm getting from you.
yeah, I would agree with that, because like I'm trying to think back on like past accomplishments, like with my bachelor's, my master's, like buying a house, and like I feel like I have the mentality of like what we were talking about before, of like, I can't believe I'm doing this, but like I'm fully in tune with the fact that I've accomplished it and I'm like there. And like, I'll say like with my bachelor's, I took a year off before getting my master's, but I think like because after I had gotten my bachelor's, I worked for a year. I think it was only part-time, I can't remember, but in a totally unrelated job, like unrelated to my bachelor's degree, and I hated it. And I think so then after a year I was like, oh my god, I have to go back to school because I'm not I'm not digging this. But I don't know, I just that's it's just I wanted to go back to school so I could get a job in the field. But now I'm like, and maybe what I should have done, and I don't know if this relates, but like maybe I should have thought more about like what I wanted to do, but I think it was just more of like getting that degree. And so I just immediately was just like, let me just get my master's in social work because that's what I got my bachelor's in. And like, yeah, at the time I wanted to do social work, and like I still like social work. I just think unfortunately social workers, there's not enough of them and they get treated like shit, and so they burn out really
and underpaid.
Yeah, so they burn out really easily. So maybe that's what that's what that is. I don't know.
I think that would be more of like the doing what you should do. Like you should go get your master's and
Yeah.
your bachelor's, and you have this interest and you're like, oh, let me go explore that. And it wasn't like, is that really what you want to do, Karlie? Or is that just what is expected because you didn't like the job that you were at? And so it's like, okay, well, I know I need to go back to school. So let me just go through the motions of kind of doing this stuff. So again, I think it's a little bit, yours is more of like self-exploration. And that is something that in hindsight, you could have taken that year off and exploring, do I want to get a master's in social work, or what would this mean, or what do I want to do, and kind of what does Karlie like and her identity as a person now, as opposed to I just got my bachelor's, like I need to go into the next thing now. I need to achieve, I need to do this, I need to do that.
And I'll say, maybe it's related to imposter syndrome, maybe not, but I will 100%, I will always think this, I feel like, that we should give kids more opportunity to explore what they enjoy. And maybe if they were given that, maybe they wouldn't feel the need of like what you're saying of like, I have to get my bachelor's, I have to get my master's, or like they would, but the feelings would coincide with it. Does that make sense? Like, I think if we gave children more opportunity to explore different types of career options, different types of whatever, and not like immediately after high school you're expected to go to college and you're expected to know what you want to do when you get there, because that makes sense. I think that there'd be more like genuinity, is that a word? I
It is now.
don't know, but yeah, but you know what I mean? Like it'd be more, because I think nowadays it's you're chasing money, you're chasing, like, and so I think unfortunately because a lot of people nowadays are chasing money, burnout is higher. And then you get the degrees and everything, and you maybe work in the profession for 2-3 years and then realize you absolutely hate it, and then and then you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? Because there are like so many careers out there that I've never even heard of, and I just wish that those would get brought up to people. I don't know, I just feel like it kind of correlates with imposter syndrome, because maybe if, like for you, Shamina, like maybe if you, instead of just like feeling like you needed to rival with that old classmate and get your AA and do all this, but if you were given like things to explore, maybe that rivalry wouldn't have been a thing, because you would have found like your passion back then, and you wouldn't have cared about all that other stuff because you found your passion and that's what you cared about. Does that make sense?
It does, and I agree on the sense that I think there would be more like authenticity and people to feel fulfillment in what they want to do, instead of this like societal pressure of you need to decide. They're like pushing kids for like late elementary, like early middle school. What are you going to do for the rest of your life? You got to take these classes, which are going to set you up in high school, which will set you up in college, which will blah, 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 blah. So I think there is so much pressure, and that almost in turn ingrains this like achievement base of you need to do this, you have to do that. And so we may go throughout our lives feeling very disconnected or inauthentic to what we're trying to achieve, because it's not what we actually want, but it's what somebody else is telling us that we should want. And I get what you're saying kind of about like the high school stuff. I would agree to a certain extent, because I, looking back now, I truly believed, and it's not until recently that I've trying to break out of this old thought pattern, but in order for me to feel like I was liked and accepted and successful, I needed to be the best. And I think that is what drove the rivalry in high school, as opposed to like, Shamina needs to figure out what she wants to do, because that didn't matter. It didn't matter what my
But you
major
didn't
was.
have the opportunity to I feel like it's hard to speak on that. I get what you're saying, but I feel like it's hard for you to say it doesn't matter, because you don't know. You don't, if we were given the opportunity as kids to explore, you don't know. You don't know what could have happened. And I feel like you said something about like how did you word it? You said something of like, instead of doing what you're supposed to do. And I feel like almost that's kind of, to me, and I could be wrong because I haven't experienced it, but like to me, it sounds like imposter syndrome is like you're doing all these things that you think you should be doing, but then you look back and you're like, whoa, like I don't know how I got here, or however you want to word it, but it could be because you don't even know what you're supposed to be doing. And I feel like that falls back into, we're not given this opportunity to explore. And I mean, for me, an example, I'm a 27-year-old. I have my freaking master's, and I have a job right now currently in a career that's totally off track of what my master's is. And I'm also deciding to take this year to explore all of these other all these other career opportunities that I could have, because I'm now realizing after 3 years of working in a job that was with my degree that I'm burnt out, and is this really even what I want to do? So now I'm a 27-year-old who went to school for social work for how many years, spent how much money getting these degrees, and now I'm like, let me spend a year trying all these different freaking jobs and see what I like to do. And I mean, like, luckily, I'm grateful enough that I've saved enough that I have the ability to do this. But, I feel like, I don't know. I just feel like it sounds to me like this all goes back to kind of, like you kind of said, like in a sense of self-worth, but also like not knowing what maybe your purpose is or what your dreams or goals are, because all you've ever known is to succeed, because that's all society has ever pushed on you is, okay, what's the next step? Okay, you have your bachelor's, now you need your master's. Okay, now you need this. And then when you finally do slow down, however that happens, you may look back and you're like, man, I don't even like medical or whatever degree you got, but I think you get this feeling of disconnect because now you are lost, because you don't know what you want, because all of this time you've just been doing what society has been telling you to do. And now you're almost having to look inward and you have to find yourself and figure out what you like. And so I feel like then you might look back, like, maybe people who have this imposter syndrome, it's because they're now, because you're saying like it's your like therapist or your clients and stuff, and it's like, well, maybe they're thinking this and seeing this or feeling this because they're now in therapy, healing and kind of finding themselves and what works for them, and they look back and they're like, I did all this work and it seems so distant because I don't know who that is, because that person was going through the motions of what society is telling you should be doing. And now that they're taking the time to work on themselves, they're like, I don't like medical stuff, but yet I have a nursing degree and that just doesn't seem like me. Like, how did I do that? Does that make sense?
It does, and I definitely can see how we can like classify it as a subset. I feel like I've never really thought of it in that way until you've described it, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think the way that I see it is more of like a and I do think it's connected in a, it's almost, I use this a lot, this analogy a lot, of like a Venn diagram. And so I think there's part of it of like what society tells us and this impacts it, and then another part of whether we experience trauma or just our own mental health as kids and how that defines our sense of self, whether we have society, because you could be raised in a household where your parents do encourage you to explore and to, do all of these types of things. And so that developmental piece may not be a factor, but if you've experienced trauma or, significant stressors or what, that's going to significantly impact your brain functioning, the way that you think, all of this type of stuff. So I think there's kind of this middle ground in between of kind of what you're talking about, Karlie, because there is a societal aspect, absolutely, but I'm talking about, I think, more of the mental health and the impact it has on our sense of self and how we view the world around us as well. And there's some like middle ground in between.
I agree, but I'll say with both of those, I don't want to say 100%, but it sounds like the people who are acknowledging that they have imposter, or they're thinking they do, are in therapy working on themselves. Does that so whether it's what I'm talking about of like the environmental, societal, or trauma, you start to notice these things when you look inward and you start to work on yourself and discover yourself. And then you're realizing like, oh, I did all of these things, but why? And maybe like you said, it's because you experienced this trauma. So that's what's making you feel this way. But you're able to acknowledge it now that Man, I just feel like therapy should be a requirement. Like everyone has to get an annual checkup or a biannual, whatever it is, 2 times a year, 1 time a year. Why are we not having to do like an annual, just like a check-in of like, how did this past year go? Oh, you experienced a divorce? Huh. Maybe you should continue to come back. Or, you know what? Hey, I think you checked out good. See you next year.
In a perfect world, sure. But no, what you're talking about, I mean, it makes a lot of sense because obviously mine is more of like the trauma and that impacted my sense of self-worth, my whatever, my high achievement, all this type of stuff. And so through my own uh, therapy that I've done, I'm breaking out of those old thought processes and recognizing that my accomplishments mean something. I do deserve whatever I work for. I am worthy of getting to this place where I am now, despite the messages that I've received as a kid or the messages that I've kind of told myself. And so I agree in either aspect, the not necessarily cure, but the way to heal from imposter syndrome can be turning inward and looking at, how do you view yourself? How does your sense of self-worth impact the decisions that you make? How does your self-talk impact all of these types of things? What do you enjoy? What is your identity now in this space? And how does that add up? Or is that even congruent to the achievements and accomplishments you've made in your life? Because you can go through the motions and you're like, yeah, on paper, I look really fantastic, but internally, I'm a hot mess, or I feel very chaotic or unstable, unput together, those type of things. So I do think, again, there is this interconnectedness between the two. And I agree. I think therapy should be
I just have another last note on this, but I wish our society did more preventative measures in all forms of health rather than reactive. Like someone has a heart attack and then they start going to the doctor. What? Or like just the most random, like, why don't we like take care of ourselves before a like catastrophe happens? But instead, and I feel like we're the only country that acts like that. I mean, any like first world, does that make sense?
yeah.
But it's just like, bro, what are we doing? I just this global pandemic is making me crazy. The amount of people in the world that just like, bro, oh my god.
But I think you're right. Imposter syndrome is man-made. It's not like a chemical imbalance or, there's not this genetic component to it. It's a societal construct that we have created and developed throughout whatever it is, whether it's from a trauma, whether it's from a lack of education or exploration. And that, I think that conversation could be a whole like season.
What conversation? Like
our society and why we don't use preventative, we use reactive measures
for the money.
Yes.
And
yes.
then okay, we're not gonna go there, but yeah, that's Karlie's 2 cents. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't want to say that I wish I have experienced it to understand it, but I think like you said, I can experience parts and like certain emotions of it. It's very interesting, and I will say that like again, I just reiterate that I can totally understand why it's not diagnosable, because it seems very like vague, I guess, or like the experience is very broad in the sense of like what it can be for anybody, and like what we explained with the DSM of like, no, there's like specific criteria that has to meet. So like I can understand that. It's interesting. It's an interesting, I don't think I've heard of it before. You brought it up recently, like when one of the viewers had asked about it. I think that's when I was just like, I don't know what that is. And then you told me a little bit and like we talked, but yeah, I think even after this conversation, it's interesting. I don't know if this was helpful.
And kind of going off of that, yes, people's experiences can be different because it could be solely in academic, or it could be solely in like your personal life, or even in like developmental milestones, like you got engaged, you got married, you had kids, like, you know, those types of things, but you still feel like an imposter, almost like a stranger was living your life, and make in those places at those times type of thing. So yes, it's vague, but there are also certain components of like that disconnect, or it does feel like a stranger, or somebody else lived your life but you have those memories type of thing. And so it can be vague, but there are like specific characteristics that a lot of people do kind of describe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I wish I could add more, like.
No, I think you brought a good alternative perspective, because I had not even thought of it in that way. Mine was more of like clinical, like trauma, anxiety, self-worth, all of that type of like lens. And so I think even for me, if it wasn't helpful for our viewers, it was helpful for me to see and hear your alternative perspective and how it could contribute to imposter syndrome, as well as like the clinical side.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the way that's like my thought right now, because I think for me, obviously when I'm going through and like my goal of like working on myself and being more true to me. So I think like that's immediately kind of what I think of like, if we worked on ourselves sooner in life and stayed true to ourselves sooner in life, I feel like a lot, not, I don't want to say like a lot, but I feel like some things would not even be an issue for certain people, because I think it's, it kind of is like, I think a lot of things come down to like expectations of what certain people or society expects of you. And you feel like you have to live up to this. And then it's almost like you get to this point where you're like, I can't do it anymore. And for everybody, it's a different age. Like for me, I felt like I was trying to live up to this person that my ex wanted. And it turns out like I felt like he was looking for perfection. And finally, I was like, I'm never going to be this person for you. Like, I'm never going to be that person. And I think that me going through all of that made me realize, like, all right, I need to just do me and stay true to me. And if someone comes in and it works out, cool. But like, I can no longer try to please this person over myself. But I think a lot of people do that. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people do it because this is how society raises us, that we should put other people before ourselves. And I think that that really needs to be, cut down. Like, no, we come first before anybody else, even if that sounds super selfish. Like, how can I help you if I'm not in a good spot? I can try, but it won't be genuine. It probably won't do you much help because you'll be able to tell that I'm not 100% there. So I'm really doing both of us a disservice. Whereas if you ask for my help and I say, you know what, Shamina, I'm sorry, I really can't right now. You may be a little disappointed, but at the end of the day, I'm probably I'm probably benefiting you more by saying no, because if I were to say yes and run myself thin, it may be a horrible time. I probably won't even be helping you. And it's just it probably would cause so much more tension in this relationship than it would have helped,
No, I agree. And there was something else that I wanted to say. Uh, dang. Oh, so look at my cute cat. Um, I agree. And also, if you do experience some form of like imposter syndrome or believe that you do, I encourage and challenge you to kind of explore your why. Why is it that you feel like it's difficult for you to accept your accomplishments? where is that disconnect kind of coming from? Is it the messages you've received as a kid, from society, from your family, from yourself? And being able to kind of explore more of your inner world and your worth and how your accomplishments stand up to that, or are there other barriers that may be in the way? You can always talk to a licensed professional about it.
I feel like lately she's been putting herself out there.
I'm not talking about me. You could talk to a kitty.
Look, there's another. Oh yes, like a licensed professional kitten, please.
Yes, a emotional support animal.
I've been seeing these like videos of your emotional water bottles, and I cannot relate more to that because I have water bottles that have to take everywhere with me. And anyways.
Oh, I was like, what are you talking about? Do they have like emotions on the water bottle or something?
No, it's just like people joke of like, I have my emotional water bottle with me because
I'm thirsty
them all the time.
Yes.
But can I just say, can you guys see how long my hair is getting?
I was gonna comment on it. Do you know who you look like with that hair right now?
Please say a woman.
You look like my mom.
Really?
Yeah.
At least it's my mom.
I was just looking at you and I was like, she totally looks like my mom right now. And I know if you knew us in high school, you knew my mom in high school because she worked at our high school. Everybody thought Karlie was her daughter, not me.
Yeah.
Because Karlie looks like my mom.
Because I'm white.
The blonde hair, the blue eyes, not just because you're Caucasian.
Anyways.
Are you feeling full yet?
Huh?
Are you feeling full yet?
Are you?
Are you? So tell us, if not, consider this. I tried my accents. I tried to work on different accents. It was not a good time. So I'm going to stick with my regular. I was like, I sound the same in all of these different types of accents. I can hear it in my head. I'm like, this sounds really good. And then it comes out of my mouth. I'm like, that was garbage. So I want to know if we confused you even more on what imposter syndrome is, or if you have a better understanding or a different type of perspective of what it could mean to you and some of the contributions that it could have made, whether it's from kind of Karlie's perspective of like the societal, environmental, or more of the developmental, clinical, mental health type.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we did confuse you more. If so, I apologize. But also I want to know, like, I guess specific, like Shamina said, like specific examples. I guess what Shamina said, and then we can go off of that and explore it more. But I'm interested because I think for me, I want to know people's examples and like the feeling, because I think I'm struggling a little bit to fully understand it, because for me, like, I really need to feel things.
This is part of the empathy piece that you can work on. You don't have to experience it to be able to empathize with it. But yes, if you do feel comfortable talking about your experience with it, comment below, DM us on our Facebook, Emotionful Podcast, DM us on Instagram at Emotionful Pod. We want to hear from you guys about your experiences, and as a learning opportunity for Karlie to better understand kind of what this is. I think it's difficult, at least it's difficult for me to kind of explain it if you haven't experienced it, because I usually talk to people, I'm like, yeah, like imposter syndrome, I feel X, Y, Z. Yeah, like I feel that too. And again, I think you feel certain components, but it's like yours is a bit different. So yeah. I think it's hard for me to even explain my experience. So hopefully you either gravitated towards Karlie's explanation or mine or none. That's okay too, because we want to hear what you guys have to say.
Yes.
So stay tuned. We are wrapping up rapidly with season 2 here, and we only have a couple more episodes left.
I can't believe I can't believe we're here. No, but really, like, what the heck?
Yeah. I know.
Who would have thought me going through a breakup would have turned into a whole damn podcast?
Do I look like the emoji?
No. Oh, okay. I was like, kind of, I guess.
But you're right. So stay tuned for the next couple of weeks. There are going to be more topics that our viewers want to know about, and we will be having our season finale coming up.
Yeah. There's in a couple epis.
It makes me think of an epinephrine pen.
I thought that the first time I said it, but I continue to say it.
So we'll see you all same time, same place next week.
Bye.
Bye.